Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and we have a familiar face back in the house in 2020. The ever inimitable Karyn Maughan.
Ayeye.
Your Ayeye has started to become quite a thing in the audience. So yeah, I think we'll just cut a clip with Ayeye at some point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm down for that.
Yes. Maughan money, Maughan problems. So we're here to talk about this battle between the public protector and the president. This year, it goes to a new pitch in many ways. But we want to break down in 5 pieces and explain what's going on here, because this is a very complex battle. So let's start with our question number 1 in this 5 questions on Ramaphosa versus Mkhwebane. How did this all start?
Well, essentially what happened was the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was answering questions in Parliament, and DA leader Mmusi Maimane asked him firstly about the VBS scandal, and then asked him a second question, said, I have evidence, I have an affidavit that 500,000 Rand was paid into an account belonging to your son, Andile Ramaphosa, by African Global Operations, formerly BASASA, which we now know from the Zondo Commission was embroiled in all kinds of very ANC-linked alleged corruption.
What a time that was in Parliament.
Yes, giving parties to various people, paying, for security, for et cetera. So he goes to the Ramaphosa and he said, what is all this about? Ramaphosa says, no, I was made aware of this. I asked my son. He did a consultancy agreement with AGO. This is completely legitimate, above board, draws a line under it.
I asked him at close range.
Yes. So then, a few days later, Ramaphosa writes to the National Assembly Speaker, at that stage was Baleka Mbete, says, oh dear, made a mistake. In fact, this account is linked to my CR17 election campaign for the ANC. And it was, in fact, a donation by Gavin Watson, who is recently deceased in the mysterious car accident at OR Tambo. And, I'm putting the correct facts on the table.
Yeah.
My money then goes to the public protector, Busisiwe Mkhwebane, and says Ramaphosa misled Parliament about this. And that, the kind of strange movement of money on his version in these accounts lends itself to a suspicion of money laundering. Can she investigate? So she then investigates and produces probably one of the biggest kind of political thorns in Ramaphosa's side in terms of a report, saying, yes, he deliberately lied to Parliament about this donation. Yes, she feels that the suspicion of money laundering is justified because of the movement of money in different accounts. Ramaphosa must disclose to Parliament all the benefits he received as part of his CR17 campaign. And the NPA must investigate what she contends is prima facie evidence of money laundering. So really, in terms of all the reports that have been released about presidents, which we all know very well, this was probably one of the most damning that's ever been released from a public protector about a president.
And it was quite a bombshell at the time. It sent shockwaves across the political spectrum.
I mean, we saw this incredible thing where Ramaphosa actually had, I think it was on a Sunday night, this sort of press conference where he personally, yes, you were there, came out, said, I believe that this is, legally and factually incorrect and wrong, and I'm going to take it on review. And, I don't want to talk about the motives, but, I do believe this is wrong. And he then launches this legal review, which is basically the subject matter of the High Court case that we're going to hear about allegedly on the 4th and 5th of February.
Right. Okay, cool. So we have our context, we have our background. Ramaphosa's response from that speech that he gave at the Union Buildings then led into various legal battles. Let's talk about how he chose to respond to the public protector's bombshell.
Well, what is fascinating is that we know from the former president, Jacob Zuma, he had a number of scuffles with public protector Thuli Madonsela. But there was always this kind of very clear, reverence, respect, as it were, between the two. A sort of circumspection. So we didn't ever see President Zuma going after the public protector, her motives, etc. His contention in, for instance, the state capture matter was that she was incorrect to ask that the Chief Justice Mkhwebane must appoint the judge who would investigate state capture, which is something that he still contends is wrong. Initially, when this case started, and Ramaphosa did not have access to what's called a Rule 52 record, which is all the information that led her to make the decisions that she did.
Right.
There was, it was like, no, it's legally, factually wrong. I don't believe this is sustained. The Executive Ethics Code can't be applied, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's, I don't believe there's a basis for a money laundering finding. Then, once he got the record, there were these question marks thrown at her about how did you get the emails? How did you get the confidential emails? The truthfulness of which he has not denied, and which suggests very strongly that, his contention that he didn't know who his funders were and was not involved and that there was all this distance was not potentially entirely true.
Right.
He also said that, she believed that she had illegally obtained his bank statements, which the FIC has said is not actually the case, that they did provide them to her.
Yeah.
And then he said that, he believed that her reasons for including these emails and the bank statements in her record, that he didn't believe that she'd really utilized them. And he said, well, I think she's done so for an ulterior purpose. Very much echoing the language that has been used by, for instance, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan in his attacks on the public protector, who he has very much put out there as a political player who is pursuing a factionless battle. And that is really the shape that this whole matter has taken. It's become very personal. Mkhwebane has hit back very strongly and said, the president's conjecture is about of a stratagem to see her removed from office, and that essentially, if anyone else said this, they would be hauled over the coals, but somehow that there's a double standard when it comes to Ramaphosa.
So let me put this to you. Do you think it's fair to say that President Ramaphosa essentially launched a kind of technical defense? He didn't dispute the amounts, really. He said there was quite a bit, as far as I remember at that press conference, something to that effect. And he basically said, I didn't really know. And if I did know, how did you get all this stuff? He didn't actually say this never happened. Is that fair?
It is fair. I mean, there's a big battle playing out because Ramaphosa contended that the emails were stolen. He also wanted access to the metadata on the emails. Mkhwebane has said they were provided to her office in hard copy form by a whistleblower, and she's not going to reveal. I'm not entirely sure if she knew who the whistleblower was, or that but in any respect she's going saying, look, we're not revealing this information, but this was legally obtained. We do get information from whistleblowers, and her conjecture is that he's arguing a technical case, and he's not looking on the bigger issue of what she's trying to address, which is accountability. That public officials in the position of Ramaphosa need to disclose openly when they receive funding. His conjecture, for instance, that the CR17 campaign was not his personal campaign, but was one for the renewal of the ANC, she contends is a completely baseless argument. She said this was about him winning that election and that these are benefits. But obviously, the political dynamics are going to enter into this.
Definitely.
And unfortunately, with Mkhwebane, she does come into the situation in a background where the Constitutional Court has supported a High Court ruling that she acted with bias in the Reserve Bank matter, that she concealed meetings. There have been other cases, including the horse racing Mpumelelo, where they've said that she tried to get them to pay a sort of multi-million rand settlement to a complainant, the Estina thing. So this whole battle with Ramaphosa comes in the context of multiple adverse court rulings against her, where she has been found to be reasonably perceived of bias.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think the third big question in terms of this Ramaphosa versus Mkhwebane battle is, okay, cool. We have the background. We know how the president responded, but then there was Mkhwebane, the public protector's response to the president's response, which brings us to this upcoming case. Talk us through, okay, the president has come out. He said, listen, you stole the records. I'm sealing the records. Yes, there was a lot of money raised. I didn't know about it. And I'm digging my heels in, and we're going to war, essentially. How does Mkhwebane then respond to that?
Well, she's basically taken the fight to him. She said, okay, well, you're saying I stole the emails? Prove it. You can't just go around making accusations and then not back it up with facts. How exactly were these emails stolen? If they were provided to me by a whistleblower, you need to prove that they're stolen. It's immensely serious. She's also said it's completely inappropriate that a Rule 52 record is sealed in this way, that these matters need to be ventilated in the open, and that doing so is completely wrong.
Yeah.
And she's also said that this is part of a stratagem to see her removed from office, and that it's about particular individuals believing that they're unaccountable. What complicates the situation is that within the factional dynamics of the ANC, there's clear, there've been a number of people, Badabile Dlamini, Angie Mocheka, David Mabuza, all of whom have faced quite serious complaints in terms of public protector investigations. Mocheka's case is still pending, but Badabile Dlamini was cleared. Mabuza was cleared. And there's an argument that's being made that if one looks at the factional dynamics that have emerged from these reports, it does seem that one side is getting particularly a harder time than the other. But apart from that, is there something there that requires answers, that requires accountability? And what makes this very interesting is that Amabongane, which is an investigative journalism body, has come out and said that Ramaphosa should disclose and the record shouldn't be sealed, that's just unsustainable, that these kind of benefits could have a very substantive could have consequences going forward.
Yeah.
If we don't know who paid for you to be elected or supported your campaign, Mkhwebane said to me once that she doesn't believe that there can be any argument that someone who funded your campaign wouldn't necessarily want some kind of benefit further down the line.
Just on that, I think one thing that people have missed in this is, were there international donors? Because the Bosasa thing is one thing, but were there international interests at play? Because I think that totally changes the dynamic of this and feeds into a narrative that Ramaphosa is close to global capital, is pursuing a particular agenda of neoliberalism, built into financial markets and big financial players. And for me, nobody has taken that leap yet to say, 800 million rand, 500 million, however much it was. Did any of that money come from outside South Africa? And if it came from outside South Africa, why did it come from outside South Africa?
Well, this is one of the pivotal things that would have come out in the FIC report, but none of those information is accessible to the public because the record has been sealed. So we don't know. We know that the FIC, my understanding is that they flagged suspicious transactions. They did a comprehensive report, but we don't have access to it. We don't have access. There have been media reports because some of these emails and bank statements have been leaked, but not all of them. We know, for instance, who some of the donors are, Maria Ramos, etc., etc., etc.
Sure.
And yes, there are going to be political consequences for who those people may be. But I think that the difficulty is that if we have a culture of secrecy around this kind of stuff, it just leads to a public apprehension that there's something to hide.
Definitely.
And that's why the legislation, like for instance, political party funding bill, those kind of things are so important because, the Constitutional Court, Mkhwebane has said, we need to have a knowledge that the public in the My Vote Counts case are entitled to know who's funding their political parties.
Across the board, right?
This
is not just about Ramaphosa.
No. I mean, for instance, there's been conjecture about DA funding in the Western Cape and property development.
EFF funding, etc.
EFF with VBS, etc., etc. And so if you're asking people to vote for you, they have a right to know who your primary financial backers are. Is Mazotti a major backer of the EFF? Is, international grouping a major backer of Ramaphosa? And you need to be able to face the questions about that.
And I think what's also different about this is that it was an internal party campaign as opposed to just party funding. And that obviously adds a new dynamic to the question of party funding on the one hand, but then also internal campaigns and even personalized internal campaigns within parties.
You see, the thing is that ANC is an ideologically divided party. It has very different views on a number of issues, and particularly on economic policy. And we see that manifesting itself in the complete, I would argue, incoherence around SOEs like SAA and Eskom, that they literally are unable to agree on issues of how to manage those entities because there's this deep ideological split. Now, there is this perception that Ramaphosa and Gordhan, have, certain ideological economic values, which seem to be at odds with the values of certain of their other fellow ANC members. And, I think that Ramaphosa's apprehension that he may well take a bit of a knock when it comes out, potentially, we don't know for sure who these funders are. But that anxiety is manifesting itself in this fear around releasing the record. And in the absence of information, in the absence of answers, speculation, innuendo will triumph.
Absolutely. Okay, let's take a step back again. We know the background. We know how the president responded. Now we know how Mkhwebane responded. I haven't found anything to fight you on yet, which is a bit of a... But now we have this case coming up, this very big case at the Pretoria High Court. Tell us about the significance of this case and where it brings us in this battle between the public protector and the president in 2020.
I think this is one of the biggest cases we're going to see this year. I think it'll probably be the subject of appeal, whatever way it goes. The National Director of Public Prosecutions is involved, Shamila Batoy, not abiding by the decision of the court, but saying that Mkhwebane's remedial action, that the NPA investigate so-called prima facie evidence of money laundering, oversteps the mark in terms of her powers. National Assembly Speaker also getting involved, saying actually taking a position aligning herself with Ramaphosa, Thandi Modise in her office, saying that the remedial action recommended by the public protector is simply legally understand and it can't be sustained, unsustainable. Saying that Ramaphosa is not an MP. They can't. The ethics committee can't exercise oversight over him. They can't force him to declare his benefits. That's not how the executive ethics code works. The FIC is also involved. They're abiding, but they have given this information where they've said, look, we didn't say that there was money laundering involved in this, but that's also not our mandate. Right. We don't know where this money comes from, so we can't necessarily say that this is about concealing the proceeds of crime, which is what the definition of money laundering is. And of course, the EFF, who have consistently taken on side-by-side alignment with Mkhwebane and are very much on her side in this matter and contesting much of the same kind of arguments that she has, and essentially supporting her report and saying that it must not be overturned, it must be upheld by the court.
And the president as well, obviously, is
very much fighting, wants the report overturned in its entirety, and says it's legally and factually shambolic, that she's just gotten facts wrong. She's even the money that's involved, she's got the numbers wrong, that her application of the law is completely misguided. And that also she has these ulterior purposes, including these very politically sensitive bank statements, emails, etc., in her record of information.
So we've got this case. So this is now the official review application of the report.
Absolutely.
That we spoke about, which implicates the president. The president's taking this report on review, and there's essentially two sides with their acolytes, as it were. Public protector and the people who support her position. President, people who support his position. And now it's getting serious because this is the substantive part of this case. Is this review appropriate? Is it legally binding or not?
Well, this is the thing, is that it's one of those very blurry lined kind of applications, because Pierre de Vos has argued that, there is a necessity for people within internal party dynamics to disclose who are supporting them. But he contends that what Mkhwebane has done is utilized a very kind of clumsy and legally unsound mechanism. And sees where one of the biggest difficulties with this case is that it is, it may be argued that there is probably on a legal level quite a strong likelihood that Ramaphosa may succeed in certain of the relief that he's seeking. What the court does with Amabungane's application, where they say that the executive ethics code, where it doesn't allow for such declaration, is actually unconstitutional. I don't know what the court's going to do with that, but with the precedent of my vote counts and other cases, I'd be very surprised if the court disagreed with their contention. So I think that there may be aspects of this where there are going to be victories on both sides.
And losses on both sides.
On both sides. But it's one of those cases that if it isn't dealt with in a nuanced and appreciative manner, and there's a perception as fostered by Mkhwebane, of a one-sidedness and a bias towards any particular party in this, that it's just going to feed into a contention that the judiciary is part of this kind of factional political battle. And so, this is one of those cases that is going to be watched, that is going to be analyzed ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And ultimately, these judges who hear this case are going to have to stand and fall by the law, but also have a deep appreciation of why accountability of public officials, whoever they may be and however popular they may be, is so important.
So let me ask you this to close off, and this is our fifth large question, right? What are the implications of this battle, and how high are the stakes in this legal battle?
The stakes for Ramaphosa are very high. He is at a moment in history where, it's very clear that the dividing lines in his party are obvious, and that his political enemies have started to circle around, for instance, arguing for the resignation of Pravin Gordhan. It's one of his strongest allies. So, this is politically explosive for him. This case is due to be heard before the State of the Nation address, which is in mid-February. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but it's going to generate a lot of heat.
Yeah.
For Mkhwebane, the stakes are also very high because she's facing the imminent prospect of an inquiry into her fitness to hold office, which has been launched by the Democratic Alliance off the back of multiple adverse court rulings, as we mentioned before, Reserve Bank, Estina, etc., etc., etc. And she's also facing, the potential of another adverse court ruling in the Constitutional Court in regard to the Pravin Gordhan matter and the Judge Potter ruling. So on all sides of this, and she very much says that this case is part of a stratagem to see her removed. So if there's further adverse findings made against her, it's gonna add fuel to that particular political fire. But it's one of those cases where I don't think there's going to be any clear winners, and I think no matter what happens, everyone's going to emerge from it somewhat bruised, somewhat bloodied, and somewhat potentially regretting that this whole matter ended up in the way that it did.
Well, more money, more problems. Thank you for your unmatched legal and political analysis, and let's see what plays out.
Thank you.
Ayeye. Thanks for watching the content. Like, share, and subscribe on all platforms. SMWX.co.za to join the WhatsApp channel. And let's build a new conversation for a new generation. Ayeye.